Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet Nashtaprayeshva Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 9, Text 23. Bhaktya Mano Yasmin Bhaktya Mano Yasmin Vacha Yannama Kirtayan Vacha Yannama Kirtayan Tyajan Kalevaram Yogi Tyajan Kalevaram Yogi Muchyate Kama Karma Bhihi Muchyate Kama Karma Bhihi Bhaktya Mano Yasmin Vacha Yannama Kirtayan Tyajan Kalevaram Yogi Muchyate Kama Karma Bhihi Bhaktya Mano Yasmin Vacha Yannama Kirtayan Tyajan Kalevaram Yogi Muchyate Kama Karma Bhihi Bhaktya Mano Yasmin Vacha Yannama Kirtayan Tyajan Kalevaram Yogi Muchyate Kama Karma Bhihi Bhaktya Mano Yasmin Vacha Yannama Kirtayan Tyajan Kalevaram Yogi Muchyate Kama Karma Bhihi Bhaktya Mano Yasmin Vacha Yannama Kirtayan Bhaktya Mano Yasmin Vacha Yannama Kirtayan Tyajan Kalevaram Yogi Muchyate Kama Karma Bhihi. Synonyms: Bhaktya, with devout attention; Aveshya, meditating; Manaha, mind; Yasmin, in whose; Vacha, by words; Yat, Krishna; Nama, holy name; Kirtayan, by chanting; Tyajan, quitting; Kalevaram, in this material body; Yogi, the devotee; Muchyate, gets release; Kama Karma Bhihi, from fruitive activities. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The personality of Godhead, who appears in the mind of the devotee by attentive devotion and meditation, and by chanting of the holy name, releases the devotee from the bondage of fruitive activities at the time of quitting his body, at the time of his quitting the material body. Translation with repetition. The personality of Godhead who appears in the mind of the devotee by attentive devotion and meditation and by chanting of the holy name releases the devotee from the bondage of fruitive activities at the time of his quitting the material body. Purport. Yoga means concentration of the mind detached from all other subject matter. And actually such concentration is samadhi, or cent% engagement in the service of the Lord. And one who concentrates his attention in that manner is called a yogi. Such a yogi, devotee of the Lord, engages himself 24 hours daily in the service of the Lord, so that his whole attention is engrossed with the thoughts of the Lord in ninefold devotional service, namely, hearing, chanting, remembering, worshipping, praying, becoming a voluntary servant, carrying out orders, establishing a friendly relationship, or offering all that one may possess in the service of the Lord. By such practice of yoga, or linking up in the service of the Lord, one is recognized by the Lord himself, as it is explained in the Bhagavad Gita concerning the highest perfectional stage of samadhi. The Lord calls such a rare devotee the best among all the yogis. Such a perfect yogi is enabled by the divine grace of the Lord to concentrate his mind upon the Lord with a perfect sense of consciousness. And thus, by chanting his holy name before quitting the body, the yogi is at once transferred by the internal energy of the Lord to one of the eternal planets where there is no question of material life and its concomitant factors. In material existence, a living being has to endure the material conditions of threefold miseries, life after life, according to his fruitive work. Such material life is produced by material desires only. Devotional service to the Lord does not kill the natural desires of the living being, but they are applied in the right cause of devotional service. This qualifies the desire to be transferred to the spiritual sky. General Bhishma Deva is referring to a particular type of yoga called Bhakti Yoga, and he was fortunate enough to have the Lord directly in his presence before he quitted his material body. He therefore desired that the Lord stay before his view in the following verses. Thus ends a wonderful transcendental Bhakti Vedanta purport. Om Ajnanatimmirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So today we have this wonderful verse. It's a series of verses by Bhishma Deva, which is extraordinary set of verses spoken by Bhishma Deva himself in the presence of the Lord. So it is extremely important, and so this whole chapter of Bhishma's passing away is a riveting chapter. And we are seeing today a continuation, next step from the last verse. If anyone remembers this last verse, Krishnam cha tat prabhavagya asinam jagadishwaram hriddhistham pujayamsha mayayopata vigraham. This is the one? Sorry, not the one. That is not the one from last time. Yes. Tathapi ekanta bhakteshu pasya bhupanukampitam yanme asums tyajatah sakshat krishno darshanam agataha. So, in last verse, Bhishma Deva is talking about ekanta bhakteshu. Tathapi ekanta bhakteshu, unflinching. For somebody who is unflinching devotee, unflinching servitor, Bhishma Deva is referring to himself as his unflinching servitor, and because of that, because him being unflinching servitor, Krishna has graciously come before me while I am ending my life. So this is what Bhishma Deva is saying. And this is despite the fact that Krishna is equally kind to everyone. So, samam sarveshu bhuteshu, he is equally kind to everyone. But if somebody is an unflinching servitor, then his reciprocation is so wonderful, his grace is so unlimited that he is personally being present before Bhishma Deva. And Bhishma Deva is further expanding on that today to make it a little bit more generic, that somebody may think that okay, he's being something special about Bhishma Deva, and we cannot attain such a state. We cannot attain this kind of a magnanimity or graciousness of the Supreme Lord. Bhishma Deva is clarifying that no, everyone can attain this. This special grace of the Lord, which may manifest in different ways, but the special grace of the Lord can be attained by everyone, but there is a qualification for that. And that is there in today's verse. Bhaktya veshya mano yasmin vacha yannama kirtayan tyajan kalevaram yogi muchyate kama karma bhihi. That is bhaktya avesha. Aveshya here is translated as meditating. Aveshya. Bhaktya. And bhaktya is translated as with devout attention. It's very, very, I would say, special translation based on the context. And if you see the next line or the next phrase, bhaktya avesha mano yasmin, manaha, mind. So because there is a mention of the mind, therefore bhaktya, sometime in other places, for example, there is a phrase called bhaktya mam abhijanati. By unflinching devotion one can know me. Only by devotion, undeviating devotion one can know me. So only devotion is the important thing in that translation. But here if you say, it is devout attention. The word attention has been added here because the reference here is to the mind. And the mind must pay attention. So while devotional service is important, but with devout attention is the key word here. So bhaktya aveshya mano yasmin vacha yannama kirtayan. So while the mind is paying attention, what are the words? What is the tongue doing? Through the words. What is the person doing? Vacha yannama kirtayan. The words are, what kind of words are coming out of the mouth? Harinama sankirtan. Holy names of the Lords are being chanted. So by the words, when somebody is constantly chanting the holy names, and when the mind is fully fixed in devotional service, then what happens? Tyajan kalevaram yogi. For such a yogi who has attained to that state, when he is quitting his body, muchyate kama karma bhihi. He gets released from all fruitive activities. So this is a state that Bhishma Deva is saying that anyone can attain this. All you have to do is this. So while Krishna is personally present before me, Bhishma is saying in the previous verse, because I am an unflinching devotee, but for you also such a thing is possible. For anyone it is possible. And what should they do for that? These are the things. The personality of Godhead, who appears in the mind of the devotee by attention and meditation and by chanting of the holy name, releases the devotee from the bondage of fruitive activities at the time of quitting his material body. So it is the personality of a Godhead who personally, this is not that some automatic formula that happens. He is saying that it is by the graciousness of the Lord. So while the Lord has his own free will, He can do whatever he pleases. He may release you or he may not release you. But this is a promise that a pure devotee is making. And what is that promise? That he is making on behalf of Krishna. Just see how much confidence he has on Krishna. He is making a promise on behalf of Krishna that if you reach this state, what is that state? Mind is having devout attention and words are constantly chanting the holy names. If you do these things, then what happens? The personality of Godhead appears in the mind of the devotee and releases the devotee from the bondage of fruitive activities at the time of quitting his material body. Now you may ask, okay, what is the value of this? It is after all Bhishma Deva is making the promise. It's not like Krishna is making the promise. But Krishna has made several such promises in Bhagavad Gita already. And Bhishma Deva was present at the time. But more than that, last verse we heard Badrinaran Prabhu was mentioning about there is a quotation he was quoting from the pastime of Ambarish Maharaj, where Durvasa Muni goes to meet the Lord and begs him to be excused. And the Lord, in the series of verses, the Lord says that I am bhakta paradhinaha. I have become subservient to my devotees. I have become subservient to my devotees. So Krishna is not independent. And in that verse there was a word that was said, aswatantraha. If you were paying attention last time, aswatantraha is, swatantrata means independence. And aswatantrata is not independent, dependent. So Krishna is saying that he is dependent on his pure devotees. So now here Bhishma Deva is ordering Krishna in a way, right? You can say, oh, see, this devotee is constantly devoted to you in his mind and he is always chanting Hare Krishna. You release him from his fruitive activities. And Krishna says, okay, if you say so, I'll release him. That is a relationship, such wonderful relationship between the pure devotee of the Lord and the Lord himself. It is unimaginable, inconceivable graciousness of the Lord, who is, for him, what is one living entity after all? He is the master of all the universes which we cannot imagine the scale of. There are billions of stars in one galaxy, billions of galaxies in a universe, and there are billions of universes in this material cosmic creation. And these billions of universes are coming out of the breathing of Mahavishnu, the Karana ocean. So that Mahavishnu is but an expansion of the Supreme Lord. It's just one expansion, that's all. So what can we imagine the position of the Supreme Lord, and what is the position of one tiny, tiny living entity in one of the billions of universes, and inside that universe billions of galaxies, one galaxy, in that galaxy there's billions of stars, one star, in that some planet, and one place, one tiny place lying in a bed of arrows. And that person, his words assume so much importance for Krishna. Just imagine the position of Krishna and how he is able to relate to us, and how merciful and graceful and having infinite potency of being able to grasp such emotions of countless living entities all over the cosmic manifestation, both spiritual and material. So there is if you see the purport here, is starting by saying, yoga means the concentration of the mind detached from all other subject matter. And actually such concentration is samadhi, or cent person engagement in the service of the Lord. And one who concentrates his attention in that manner is called a yogi. So this subject matter has been covered in depth in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So I'll quote some verses from the 6th chapter which are directly relating to this, and you can see how Prabhupada's translations to those verses are and the purports are taking the reader in alignment with this statement from Bhishma Deva. Because it's very easy for someone reading Bhagavad Gita, let's say there was some other translation of Bhagavad Gita, not Prabhupada's translation. You can sit so comfortably so that he doesn't block you. Your neck is craned like that, it may develop some stiffness. Yeah, nice. Um, let's say you're reading some other Bhagavad Gita, not Bhagavad Gita as it is, reading from some translation of somebody else. Oftentimes, translators would look at their own philosophy. Let's say there's a translator who has a philosophy of impersonalism. Then they will translate entire Bhagavad Gita, including verses like Man Manabhava Mad Bhakto Mad Dhyaji Mam Namaskuru. Always think of me, worship me, offer obeisances to me, become my devotee. When Krishna is saying that, then that is translated by who is Dr. Radhakrishnan. Prabhupada quotes that as it is not to Krishna that one must offer obeisances, it is to the unborn within Krishna. This is the translation of Dr. Radhakrishnan, very eminent scholar, follower of Advaita system. So, a person who is motivated by their own interpretation is misconstruing the words of Krishna in such a way that even a most direct instruction by Krishna, where he says, become my devotee, the translation is, no, it is not, and it's actually the purport. In the purport, Dr. Radhakrishna says, okay, when Krishna says, become my devotee, he actually means, become a devotee of the unborn within Krishna. Now, we all have an unborn within our body, right? There is this body which was born at a certain time, correct? All of us celebrate that day. Although every year that day goes by is 1 year less left for this body. But somehow we feel there is a cause for celebration. So we celebrate that day, birthday, for this body. But do anyone celebrate the birthday for their soul? No. Nobody celebrates birthday for soul. We don't know when we were born. But actually there is no birthday for the soul. The soul is unborn. So if you want to actually refer to the I, it is the unborn within this body. So that's the correct way to refer to the I, to the person that I am thinking of as myself, that is I, the real person who is experiencing this world, is actually the spirit soul. That's the real I. And so somebody who thinks that Krishna's body is also material would think that, oh, Krishna also has a soul. Although it's a very powerful soul. Krishna's soul is very powerful. But that is not the correct understanding of Krishna, because Krishna's body and Krishna's soul, there is no difference. The entire body is a soul, supreme spirit. The entire body of Krishna is a supreme spirit. So there is no such thing as the unborn within Krishna. So this is the way in which even a direct instruction is misinterpreted by some other commentators who have got their own philosophy. And they cannot go against their personal philosophy. So therefore they are missing out on the direct words of Krishna. Now, when Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita a certain statement, now does it mean that only in that chapter and in that verse that statement is true? Or is it true throughout? What do you think? Let us say Krishna says, Man Manabhava Mad Bhakto Madhyaji Mam Namaskuru. He says, Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mam Ekam Sharanam Raja. Abandon all varieties of religion, surrender unto me. Is that statement true only in the 18th chapter, or is it true always? It is true always. Correct? It is true in first chapter also, second chapter also. That statement is always true. Correct? So anything that he says, that backdrop of those statements of Krishna, where he is highlighting the devotional service to be the topmost, they are always true. And therefore, when any system is being explained by Krishna, Prabhupada is always keeping the context of the fact that Krishna actually wants you to become a devotee. And how do we know Krishna wants you to become devotee? He's saying that in Bhagavad Gita, in many places. And he's saying that is what I want. And that's the topmost. But if you're not able to do that, then do this. If you're not able to do that, then do this. So he gives various systems depending on what you're able to do. But what he wants from you, he's making it very clear, abundantly clear. And so you see in 6th chapter, which is talking about Sankhya Yoga. Chapter is titled Sankhya Yoga, and there is sorry, let me be precise here. Yeah. Chapter is titled Sankhya Yoga, and there is a description of the Ashtanga Yoga process or Dhyana Yoga, where a person advances in the yoga practice by controlling of mind and senses. So if you see this subject matter, if anybody were to simply read this literally, then they would say, okay, this is talking about controlling the mind. Where does it say that controlling the mind means placing the mind on Krishna? Like here, for example, Bhishma Deva is saying, Bhaktya Veshya Mano Yasmin Vacha Yannama Kirtayan. So here is very clearly saying that with devout attention, meditating, when the mind is meditating upon the Supreme Lord, then the Supreme Lord frees him from all the fruitive reactions. And if you see a yogi, the purpose is also to become freed from all the fruitive reactions. But if you see in some of the verses, Krishna is saying mind should be controlled. One should, and let's look at this one particular verse. I'll start from this verse and read a few verses. Uddharet atmanatmanam natmanam avasadayet atmaiva hi atmano bandhur atmaiva ripuratmanah. So in this verse is a very memorable verse in Bhagavad Gita, where the word Atma comes 7 times in one verse. In one verse itself, the word Atma comes 7 times. So the translation is, one must deliver himself with the help of his mind and not degrade himself. The mind is a friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. So what is the verse exactly? Uddharet. Uddharet is one must deliver. Atmanat atmanam. By the mind, the conditioned soul. So the first line is saying one should deliver himself with the help of the mind. Natmanam avasadayet. And not degrade. Avasadayet is translated as put into degradation. Natmanam is not by the, should not, the conditioned soul should not become degraded. Atmaiva hi atmano bandhur. The mind itself is the friend of the conditioned soul. Atmaiva ripuratmanaha. And Atma is also the Ripuhu is the enemy of the conditioned soul. So the mind, which is a friend, can be the friend, can also be the enemy. And the next verse will say how, under what situations it is a friend, under what situations it is enemy. But here it is saying that it can be friend, can be enemy. And what should one do with the mind? One should uplift oneself and not degrade oneself. Now, one may say that if somebody is reading this, right, you may say that, okay, but where is the mention of devotional service in this? In the verse that Krishna is speaking, there is no mention of devotional service. It is simply saying that one should not uplift the mind, one should uplift the mind and not degrade. But now look at purport by Prabhupada. The word Atma denotes body, mind and soul, depending upon the different circumstances. In the yoga system, the mind and the conditioned soul are especially important. Since the mind is a central point of yoga practice, Atma refers here to the mind. The purpose of yoga system is control the mind and draw it away from the attachment to sense objects. It's the exact sentence that is there in today's verse also. If you see today's verse, in the purport, Prabhupada is saying, yoga means, this is the first line, yoga means concentration of the mind detached from all subject matter. And here, what does it say? The purpose of yoga system is to control the mind and draw it away from attachment to sense objects. Just see how some verse in Bhagavad Gita and one line in the purport, and some verse in Bhagavatam and one line in the purport, exact definition of what is yoga. Just see the correlation between them. And if you see the verse today, Bhaktya Vesha Mano Yasmin Vacha Yannama Kirtyan Tyajan Kalevaram Yogi. And just that one word yogi is a connection between the Bhagavatam verse and this verse, which is talking about Ashtanga Yoga, and see the consistency of the purport. So continuing the purport of this 6th chapter verse, the purpose, okay, that I already read, it is stressed herein that the mind must be so trained that it can deliver the conditioned soul from the mire of nescience. In the material existence, one is subjected to the influence of mind and senses. In fact, the pure soul is entangled in the material world because the mind is involved with false ego, which desires it to lord it over material nature. Therefore, the mind should be so trained that it will not be attracted by the glitter of material nature, and in this way the conditional soul may be saved. One should not degrade oneself by attraction to sense objects. The more one is attracted to sense objects, the more one becomes entangled in material existence. And then Prabhupada says this, makes this statement, the last statement, as he always does, that the best way to disentangle oneself is to always engage the mind in Krishna consciousness. Now, this is the key link that Prabhupada is giving in the 6th chapter, verse after verse. How the verse itself, somebody reads it the first time, may think that, but wait a minute, there is no Krishna consciousness mentioned in the verse. But Prabhupada is taking us to the solution of how to achieve the state that is mentioned in that verse. But there is actually no other way to achieve it. Because the mind is by nature getting attracted. It has a tendency to be attracted to the glitter of material nature. And if we get attracted to that, then there is no way to upgrade ourselves. We will get degraded. So there is only one way to achieve that, and that is to engage in Krishna consciousness. And then Prabhupada continues on to say that the word he is used for emphasizing this point, that one must do this. And it is also said, and he's quoting a verse from Amrita Bindhu Upanishad, Mana eva manushyanam karanam bandha moksheha bandhaya vishaya sango muktyai nirvishayam manaha. For man, mind is the cause of bondage, and the mind is the cause of liberation. Mind absorbed in sense object is a cause of bondage, and mind detached from the sense object is a cause of liberation. Therefore, the mind which is always engaged in Krishna consciousness is a cause of supreme liberation. So this is almost like a mathematical proof or a derivation that Prabhupada is giving, so that one may have no doubt as to how do you get from the point of controlling the mind to the point of Krishna consciousness is the only option. Why is it the only option? Because detachment from sense objects is not possible unless you are attached to something higher. Unless you are attached to something higher, it is impossible for us to be detached from sense objects. It's simply not possible. Therefore, attachment to Krishna is the only way by which we can become detached from sense objects, and that is a necessary qualification for becoming a yogi. Now, let us see further verse here. So the verse that I just read was 6.6, and this is 6.7. The verse is Jitatmana prashantasya paramatma samahitaha shitoshna sukha dukkeshu tatha manapamanayoho. For one who has conquered the mind, super soul is already reached, for he has attained tranquility. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. So this is a very difficult to understand subject, in a sense, little non-intuitive. Why? Because normally we think of someone who has become self-controlled, mind is controlled. We think that such a person is like a sage, a controlled sage, Muni, little bit secluded, living apart, very controlled. But actually, what we would not intuitively think that such a person already has attained to the super soul. Because somebody has attained to the super soul is a devotee. And when you are coming into Krishna consciousness, we often hear about the difference between a devotee and a sadhaka, or a yogi, a philosopher, a jnani, right? These are different types of consciousness of people. And a person whose mind, if somebody were to ask you, okay, there is a person who's controlled in his mind, controlled in his senses. Is that person a devotee? You would say no. A devotee is different, being self-controlled is different. But Krishna says here no. No. Actually, only a devotee can be self-controlled. This statement proves there is a if and only if, right? To assert something, you need to have if something, and then only if and only if. So in the previous purport, it is said that if you want to achieve the state of upgrading your mind by your mind, you must take to Krishna consciousness. Right? But here it says, for one who has conquered the mind, super soul is already reached. That means whichever way you think you are doing something and you are conquering your mind, you have already attained the super soul. In other words, without attaining the super soul, it is not possible to conquer the mind. Without taking to Krishna consciousness, it is not possible. This is further reinforcing that point, for he attained tranquility. Actually, the purport of this verse, every living entity is intended to abide by the dictation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is seated in everyone's heart as Paramatma. When the mind is misled by the external illusory energy, one becomes entangled in material activities. Therefore, as soon as one's mind is controlled through one of the yoga systems, one should be considered to have already reached the destination. One has to abide by the superior dictation. When one's mind is fixed on the superior nature, he has no alternative but to follow the dictation of the Supreme. The mind must admit some superior dictation and follow it. The effect of controlling the mind is that one automatically follows the dictation of Paramatma or Super Soul. Because this transcendental position is at once achieved by one who is in Krishna consciousness, the devotee of the Lord is unaffected by the dualities of material existence, namely distress and happiness, cold and heat, etc. This state is practical samadhi or absorption in the Supreme. So in today's verse also, there is mention of samadhi in the purport. And actually such concentration is samadhi or 100% engagement in the service of the Lord. And here Prabhupada is saying in the purport of Bhagavad Gita verse that this state is practical samadhi or absorption in the Supreme. Now, if you just look at this purport, there are some things that jump out. Let's just pay attention to this. If you look at these two sentences, they are standalone sentences. They are not dependent on any previous sentence. And they are startling in what they convey. So this first sentence says, one has to abide by superior dictation. That's all. Just standalone sentence in the purport. Just look at this, read this one more time. One has to abide by superior dictation. When you're reading purports like this by ourselves, sometimes it's easy to miss such startling statements, assertions like this one. One has to abide by superior dictation. So if you were to just take this one statement alone, nothing that we do, really speaking, is of our own, what we want to do. We are forced to do something by circumstances around us. Very, 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 very difficult for us to actually do something that we want to do on our own. Anything that let's say we have to take up a job, it's forced. It's forced because we have no choice. We have to maintain our body and soul. What we do in the work, what we do, whether we have to listen to some professor, if you are doing a PhD, or some teacher if you are a student, or you have to listen to some boss in the office. And then you come home, you have to listen to family members. If you are a wife, you have to listen to children and husband. If you are a husband, you have to listen to the wife, children, everything. You are never actually acting of your own free will. Very rarely. Very, very rare. So Prabhupada is making this assertion, one has to actually abide by superior dictation. Now, if you look at even from a senses point of view, from Bhagavad Gita says that there are 5 senses and these are controlled by the mind. The mind is controlled by intelligence. Intelligence is controlled by false ego. And false ego, who is superior to false ego? Sorry? The super soul. The soul, the individual soul. And the individual soul is part and parcel of Krishna. And Krishna says that everyone follows my path in all respects. Which verse he says that in? He says, everyone follows my path in all respects. Which verse is that in? Not Aham Sarvasya Prabhu. It is in the context of reciprocation. Ye yatha mam prapadyante tam sataiva bhajamyaham mama vartamanu vartante manushya partha sarvashaha. So, I reciprocate as people surrender unto me. Everyone follows my path in all respects. So what does it mean? It means that no matter whether you think you're an atheist Whether you think you're an agnostic person, you think you're a devotee, no matter what, you're actually following the system of Krishna. You are not independent. You cannot be independent. Nobody is independent. One has to follow superior dictation. There is no choice. We have no choice. But because we want to be independent, there is a world created where there is an illusion of independence. There is an illusion of independence. But actually at every step we are dependent. Always we are dependent on Krishna. Whether we like it or not, whether we want it or not, we are always dependent on higher dictation. But in this case, when a person does not want to be surrendered to Krishna, then whose dictation is he listening to? The illusion, illusory energy, Maya's dictation. So therefore, this statement, the very next line, what Prabhupada says, but when one's mind is fixed on superior nature, he has no alternative but to follow the dictation of the Supreme. So what does it happen if one is not fixed on superior nature? That means he's fixed on inferior nature. And that is the material nature. So he has no choice but to follow the dictation of the material nature. So really, the choice that we have is, do we want to follow the dictation of material nature or the supreme, the superior nature? This is the choice that we have. We have no choice of being independent. We have to follow dictation. But which nature do we want to follow the dictation of? That we can choose, and we can train ourselves accordingly. And this statement, two statements that Prabhupada is making, this exact principle that one has to abide by superior dictation, therefore one must take to superior nature. This principle, he has repeated it twice in the same purport. Just see the second statement in red. Now see the another statement in red color. The mind must admit some superior dictation and follow it. Again, this is an independent assertion. It is not dependent on anything else. Any other statement, anywhere else. It is an independent statement by itself. The mind must admit some superior dictation and follow it. Then immediately after that, in green, the effect of controlling the mind is that one automatically follows the dictation of Paramatma or Super Soul. So, if you want to control the mind, then actually the only way is to redirect the mind from the control of material nature to control of superior nature. There is inferior nature to superior nature. The moment we redirect our mind from inferior nature to superior nature, mind becomes controlled. That is the purport of this. Now, there is a couple of more points I just want to share here, and then I'll go to the next point. This transcendental position is at once achieved by one who is in Krishna consciousness. And then the last line, this state is practical samadhi, we already saw that. Now, the next verse after this is also very important. It's a series of these three verses, and then I'll go to the last verse in the 6th chapter. This next verse, 6.8, is saying, Jnana Vijnana Triptatma Kutastho Vijitendriyaha Yukta iti Uchyate Yogi Samaloshrama Kanchanaha. So this verse is defining a yogi, because in today's verse also there is a reference to the yogi. And now, having seen the two previous verses, how with the mind one should upgrade oneself, uplift oneself and not degrade, right? That was a 6.6. Then 6.7, what is saying? That one who has controlled the mind has already attained Super Soul, Paramatma. In other words, only by redirecting one's mind towards a superior nature, you can actually control the mind. There is no other way. And now this verse is saying, such a person is called a yogi. So let's just see what this verse is. A person is said to be established in self-realization and is called a yogi or a mystic when he is fully satisfied by the virtue of acquired knowledge and realization. Such a person is situated in transcendence and is self-controlled. He sees everything, whether be it pebbles or stones or gold, as the same. And as always, there are some very enlightening points in the purport, and let's just look at this first point. Directly Prabhupada is saying, because somebody reads this verse, they'll say, okay, I should attach the mind to the superior nature, fine, I understood. Okay, thank you, got it. That is bookish knowledge. That is what you're hearing. Of course, if a person is as pure as say, Shukadeva Goswami in the womb, or as Parikshit Maharaj, then by hearing one can become perfect. Hearing becomes realized knowledge. But for a conditioned soul who has got several mental blocks, hearing alone is not sufficient. Hearing the Bhagavatam class alone is not sufficient. You have to follow the instructions given in the Bhagavatam class, and you have to practice that. Why? Because our mind is not accepting what we hear in the class. It's not fully accepting. If we simply had an open mind, then hearing is sufficient. It becomes realized knowledge. But here Prabhupada is differentiating book knowledge. So he says book knowledge without realization of the supreme truth is useless. This is stated as follows. Atah Shri Krishna Namadi na bhavet grahyam indriyaihi sevon mukhehi jihvado swayameva spurati adaha. So, and the translation is, no one can understand the transcendental nature of the name, form, quality and pastimes of Sri Krishna through his materially contaminated senses. Only when one becomes spiritually saturated by the transcendental service to the Lord are the transcendental name, form, quality and pastimes of the Lord revealed to him. So the purport of this really is that while we may theoretically understand that one must redirect our mind to superior nature, but that does not mean that superior nature will become manifest to us, or that we will begin to understand the superior nature, or that we can understand who Krishna is. Because Krishna is beyond our comprehension by our own mind. Our mind is a conditioned mind. It is part of matter, subtle matter. And through matter, you cannot understand spirit. Matter cannot understand spirit. Matter is inferior, right? So when you are using your matter to understand Krishna, which is mind, actually you cannot understand Krishna. But how does the mind get controlled through this? It happens because Krishna enables that mind to understand him. Swayam eva spurati adaha. Krishna manifests himself. When you use your words, your body and the mind, sevon mukhehi jihvadau, starting from the chanting of the holy names, and by paying attention to the sound, by chanting and hearing, then by paying attention to the sound, and attention is coming from mind. There is a foreground mind and the background mind. And if you hear Madhu Pandit Prabhu's class, you will see the difference. He speaks at length about both. By repeated chanting and hearing, both the foreground mind and the background mind become trained to pay attention to the sound of Hare Krishna Mahamantra. So when we chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, and we train our mind to pay attention to the sound, then both the background mind and the foreground mind both get trained. And however, you may think, how is it that I can understand Krishna with this? It is because Krishna reveals himself by no other way. So when Bhishma Deva is saying that Bhaktya Veshya Mano Yasmin Vacha Yan Nama Kirtayan, Bhaktya Veshya Mano Yasmin Vacha Yan Nama Kirtayan Tyajan Kalevaram Yogi Muchyate Kama Karma Bhihi. And the translation says, the personality of Godhead, this is today's verse, who appears in the mind of the devotee. So it is by Krishna's appearance that actually our mind is getting purified and we are able to further understand Krishna and we are able to fix our attention on Krishna. Without the enablement of the attention energy from Krishna, it is not even possible for us to focus our mind on Krishna. So even as we desire to attach our mind to superior nature, the superior nature starts to give us the attention energy by which we could actually be attentive. So if you want to be attentive while chanting and chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra, how is it that a person who is endeavoring to chant sometimes gets the ability to chant and sometimes does not get the ability to chant? When we think that I am with my mind, I am paying attention, immediately the attention will go away. But if we are hearing the Lord and with the mood that because I am paying attention to the holy name is giving me the energy to pay attention, then the attention stays. Because we are hearing the holy name, and holy name is not different from Krishna. And if we understand in our background mind that holy name is actually the reservoir of the attention energy, all kinds of energies. Swabhaviki Jnana Bala Kriyacha. What is the first line of that? what is that? He satisfies the desires of all kinds of living entities. Chetanas chetananam eko bahunan yo vidhata kaman. It is not that verse. Okay. So all the jnana, bala, kriya, all the energies, they are all originating from Krishna. Because he is the source of all energies. Therefore, the attention energy, which is a property of the soul, that is also part and parcel of Krishna. And that is dormant. And if we want the soul to pay attention, the soul wants to experience the bliss but does not know how. Using the vehicle of the mind, we can pay attention to the sound. And that mind is Krishna's energy. So the properties of the mind, which are ability to pay attention, it can pay attention anywhere. So unless Krishna enables and provides that enablement to us, it is very difficult for us to actually pay attention to the sound. So as we are paying attention to the sound, we have to have the mood of begging Krishna for the ability to pay attention. That is the only way in which the attention will sustain. There is no other way. So, just continuing on to this purport, Prabhupada says, this Bhagavad Gita is a science of Krishna consciousness. No one can become Krishna conscious simply by mundane scholarship. One must be fortunate enough to associate with a person who is in pure consciousness. A Krishna conscious person has realized knowledge by the grace of Krishna because he is satisfied with pure devotional service. By realized knowledge, one becomes perfect. By transcendental knowledge, one can remain steady in his conviction. But a mere academic knowledge, one can easily be deluded and confused by apparent contradictions. It is a realized soul who is actually self-controlled because he is surrendered to Krishna. So now you see here, Atma Nivedanam. In today's purport also, there are 9 processes of bhakti that have been mentioned. Prabhupada is saying, one who, such a yogi of the Lord, such a yogi devotee of the Lord, engages himself 24 hours daily in the service of the Lord, so that his whole attention is engrossed with the thoughts of the Lord in 9-fold devotional service, namely hearing, chanting, remembering, worshipping, praying, becoming a voluntary servant, carrying out orders, establishing friendly relationship, or offering all that one may possess in the service of the Lord. And that is summarized in this purport, which I am just reading here, Bhagavad Gita 6.8. It is the realized soul who is actually self-controlled because he is surrendered to Krishna. That is Atma Nivedanam. He is transcendental because he has nothing to do with mundane scholarship. For him, mundane scholarship and mental speculation, which may be as good as gold to others, are of no greater value than pebbles or stones. So if you see today's verse, it is in fact describing the summary of, it is the essence of the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. And that essence in the 6th chapter itself is given in the final verse of the 6th chapter. And that is also again stressed in today's verse also. Yoginam api sarvesham mat gater antaratmanah shraddhavan bhajate yomam tame yukta tamo mataha. So that devotee, that yogi who is, let me see the exact translation. And of all yogis, he who always abides in me with great faith, worshipping me in transcendental loving service, is most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. So in today's purport also, Prabhupada is saying that such a person is recognized by the Lord himself. By such practice of yoga or linking up in the service of the Lord, one is recognized by the Lord himself, as is explained in the Bhagavad Gita concerning the highest perfectional stage. So the highest perfectional stage is 6.47. Yoginam api sarvesham madgater antaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yomam same yukta tamo mataha is the highest of all. So this 6th chapter is essentially being summarized in today's verse, and the main essence of that is that continuing from the last verse, where the graciousness of the Lord was mentioned. If somebody is a pure devotee, then the Lord is so gracious that he becomes manifest before him. And today's verse is saying, that graciousness is so much that not only that he is simply present before you, but he actually enters your mind and helps you attain the devout attention, bhaktya veshya. The state of bhaktya veshya is actually enabled by the Lord himself. And that is a mind-boggling mercy of the Lord, that out of trillions and trillions of living entities, he is coming down individually, personally, just because we have said, okay, now I want to train my mind on the superior nature. He says, oh, so nice. One tiny speck of living entity somewhere in one galaxy, in one star, one planetary solar system, somewhere one person out of billion people. He says, I want to train my mind by fixing on superior nature. Oh, nice. Immediately he comes down and he enters into our mind and says, I'll help you. So that is the purport, and that is the entire process of 6th chapter of Dhyana Yoga, is actually to achieve that state. So with this I'll stop here and see if you have any questions or comments. It means Arna Koyo Asha. Today's, we just sang. So the question that Chaitanya Prabhu is asking is, what's the meaning of transcendentally saturated with devotional service? So today we saw in Guru Puja, Guru Mukha Padma Vakya, Chitete Koriho Aikya, Arna Koriho Mane Asha. That is saturation of transcendental service. When we take the words emanating from his lotus mouth as a perfection that fulfills all desires, that means there is no other desire in our heart. And in last class, Prabhu spoke about desirelessness. That is, desirelessness is actually desiring to please Krishna. That is what desirelessness means, right? Not being desireless means free of material desires. And that means we need to focus our attention on pleasing Krishna's desires. So when one's only desire is to please Krishna, that is called saturation in devotional service. Because that's what your spiritual master wants you to attain. And those words emanating from the lotus mouth of the spiritual master, when we make that our life and soul, and we act according to that, and even though, and in our sadhana stage right now, it is possible to act according to that. It is possible. Even though our mind may not be trained, it may not be trained in the sense of desires. It may have a lot of desires. Other desires may be there, other ambitions may be there. But by following the instructions at that point of the higher authority, and keeping that as the primary guiding factor in our life. Primary guiding factor. What my primary activity, the big decisions I make, what I do with my time. Those decisions are made in accordance with the instructions of higher authority. When we do that, we are taking a very big step towards getting to the point of saturating, because the higher authority knows exactly what is the level of time commitment and activity that we are in a position to undertake right now. So when we follow that instruction, which at this point of time is appropriate for me, then you become eligible to the next step, then the next step, and the next step, and so on, until we reach the point where, okay, now anarthas have been removed. In the stages of surrender, of progressing in devotional service, the first stage is Ado Shraddha, little bit of faith. Then Tataha Sadhu Sangha, one associates with devotees. Then Bhajana Kriya, Tataha Bhajana Kriya. So what is Bhajana Kriya? Chanting of Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Chanting and hearing. Chanting and hearing. And then when we do this continuously, following the instructions of spiritual master and the Vaishnavas, then what happens? Anartha Nivritti. So Anartha Nivritti is all unwanted materialistic activities and desires and thoughts, they all go away. Then one establishes firm faith in the words of the spiritual master, Nishtha, firm faith. The devotional service is the perfection that will satisfy everything that I want. Firm faith from which you won't fall down is reached after that Anartha Nivritti stage. So this complete saturation is crossing the Anartha Nivritti stage. When you cross over, then all unwanted things go away. Any other questions? So actually there is one small conversation that I came across, because if you see here, a lot of times Prabhupada says chanting of Hare Krishna is important. You'll see here in Bhagavad Gita, chanting. But you also hear Madhu Pandit Prabhu saying chanting and hearing. Hearing is also very important. Hearing of the word that you're chanting. And if you see Prabhupada's conversations, there is one conversation. Let me just read that. Very short, just 2 lines. There is a person who is asking, there is one guest in a conversation after having given in a morning walk. This is a morning walk conversation. And there is one guest who is saying, she is also doing that japa. So we don't know who he's referring to, but he's saying that. And while this doing mala and doing japa, the mind doesn't remain fixed in God. It wanders about. So what is the way of fixing the mind? This is a question. I think it's a question for all of us. This question is being asked. Prabhupada answers, to hear. Hare Krishna. Chant and hear. That's all. That's the answer. Simple answer. So that is the process. We'll stop here. Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada ki. Thai Gaur Prema.